Hello and a very warm welcome. You are watching Gravitas with me, Gandhi. Our top story tonight is about the Indian Navy. It has once again proven to be the first responder in the Indian Ocean region. The Indian Navy has achieved what no other navy even dared to attempt. This weekend, the Indian Navy rescued a hijacked commercial ship, MV Ruen. It was a daring operation at sea. There was exchange of heavy gunfire. The operation lasted 40 hours, and by the end of it, the Indian Navy freed 17 sailors. It also took into custody 35 Somali pirates. All of this was happening some 2,600 kilometers from the Indian coast. The question is, where were the other navies? Were they also afraid? We are starting off with a quick flashback. On the 14th of December 2023, Malta-flagged MV Ruen was sailing in the Arabian Sea. It was carrying cargo worth over $1 million. It was mainly metals from South Korea. MV Ruen was hijacked near the Yemeni island of Socotra. Somali pirates took control of the ship, moved it towards Somalia, and eventually turned Ruen into a mother pirate ship. No one could tell for sure what happened with the ship in the 3 months that followed. Now, cut to the 15th of March. The Indian Navy tracked down the location of Ruen. INS Kolkata was tasked with intercepting this very ship. The Navy destroyer was backed by petrol vessel INS Subhadra. A P-81 long-range maritime patrol aircraft was also deployed. So were high-altitude drones. Ruen was sailing some 260 nautical miles east of Somalia. INS Kolkata intercepted it. The Indian Navy flew a drone over the pirate ship to gauge the situation on board, and they found that there were armed pirates on the vessel. Things suddenly got uglier. The Somali pirates shot down the drone. They also fired at INS Kolkata. And what happened then? India followed international law. Indian troops disabled Ruen's steering system, also hit the ship's navigational aids. Ruen could not sail anymore. It had to stop. INS Kolkata then positioned itself close to Ruen. Then began long hours of forceful negotiations. And the next morning, INS Subhadra was deployed in the area. The Indian Air Force joined in as well. An IAF C-17 Globemaster III aircraft airdropped 2 combat rubberized raiding craft, what's called CRRC. It also airdropped Marine commandos to the region. Take a look. These are Navy Marcos being airdropped in the Arabian Sea. Now remember, all of this was happening some 2,600 kilometers off the Indian coast. The pirate ship was kept under surveillance by high-altitude, long-endurance unmanned aerial vehicle and P-81 maritime reconnaissance aircraft. The operation lasted 40 hours. At one point, the pirates were using MV Ruen's crew as human shields. We have a video here. When the vessel was captured by the pirates, there were 7 Bulgarian crew on board, 9 Myanmar nationals and 1 Angolan national. All of them have now been freed. The Indian Navy has been able to evacuate all 17 original crew members of MV Ruen. They were freed from the pirates without any injury, and the Indian Navy also managed to get all 35 Somali pirates on board the vessel to surrender. They are being brought to India. Some of you may be wondering why. You see, the usual practice in anti-piracy operations is to set the pirates adrift. This, of course, is after disarming them and also ensuring that the pirates don't pose a threat to other vessels. But here, the pirates aboard Ruen fired at the Indian Navy, and this changes the situation. And so they are being brought to India, and they will be prosecuted under Indian laws. Let's just talk about the bigger picture here. Some of the questions here may sting. You see, the hijacking of MV Ruen highlighted the dual threat commercial vessels were facing in the high seas. The Houthis, also the Somali terror. MV Ruen was hijacked 3 months back. It was the first time since 2017 that Somali pirates had boarded a commercial vessel and hijacked it. What did the navies around the world do in response? The United States is leading a naval alliance in the Red Sea, Operation Prosperity Guardian, in case you forgot. Did this alliance do anything to try and free the crew of MV Ruen? Like most operations so far in the Arabian Sea, it was the Indian Navy that dared to fight the pirates and free the innocent sailors. India used minimal force to neutralize the threat to commercial shipping. India deployed its Navy, its Air Force. It abided by international law, conducted a 40-hour-long operation some 2,600 kilometers from the Indian coast with no vested interests whatsoever. You see, this is India's commitment to peace, its commitment to maritime security, anti-piracy. The owner of the ship hailed the operation and Ruen's release as a quote, "This operation has displayed the prowess of the Indian Navy. Major success not only for us, but for the entire global maritime community." Bulgaria's Deputy Prime Minister, Maria Gabriel, thanked the Indian Navy for its courageous operation, saying, and I'm quoting here, "I express my gratitude to the Indian Navy for the successful operation to rescue the hijacked vessel Ruen and its crew members, including 7 nationals. Thank you for support and great effort." Now, replying on behalf of India, the External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, said, "That is what friends are for." And with this operation, the Indian Navy has once again proven that it is, after all, the first responder in the Indian Ocean region. India is also the only reliable security provider in the region. And speaking of threats to regional security, border tensions between Pakistan and Afghanistan have risen. Pakistan seems to be following India's footsteps, well, specifically the Modi government's footsteps. Overnight, Pakistan carried out 2 airstrikes inside Afghanistan, killing 5 women and 3 children. A spokesperson for the Taliban government, Zabiullah Mujahid, said that Pakistan's reckless strikes had hit homes near the border with Pakistan at around 3 p.m. local time. At around 3 local time, the strikes reportedly took place in the eastern border provinces of Khost and Paktika. And hours later, the Taliban government in Afghanistan responded in kind. They also fired across the border after strongly condemning the attacks. Now, here's the kicker. First, the Pakistan military denied hitting the targets in Afghanistan and then confirmed carrying out the attack inside Afghanistan. Pakistan's foreign ministry confirmed the cross-border strike. The ministry said that the target of the operation was the terrorists belonging to Hafiz Gul Bahadur Group, which along with Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan is responsible for multiple terrorist attacks inside Pakistan. Earlier, according to the media and the public relations wing of the Pakistan Armed Forces, ISPR, the strike successfully eliminated armed fighters who had orchestrated a recent attack on the Pakistan military. Refuting Taliban's version of what really happened, Pakistan says they eliminated 8 terrorists in the operation that purportedly took place within Pakistan territory. Now, Pakistan says that the terrorists killed were behind the recent attack against its security forces on the 16th of March. In a statement issued on Monday afternoon, the ISPR called it an intelligence-based operation. The ISPR statement did not mention Taliban's claims of airstrikes on Afghan soil this morning. The strikes today come at a time when Pakistan has blamed the Taliban for the rising violence against the Pakistan Army personnel. In recent months, the Pakistan military has been repeatedly targeted by armed groups affiliated to the Afghan Taliban. Just take the example of the Tehreek-e-Taliban or the TTP. Over the past few months, the TTP has orchestrated many attacks on Pakistan Army personnel. Their key goal is to overthrow the government of Pakistan. And they plan to do this by waging a terrorist campaign against Pakistan armed forces and the state. But you see, it's not just TTP. There are several other new terror groups that have made their life's aim to target the Pakistan army. And so, for some time now, Islamabad has blamed Afghan Taliban for providing safe haven to terror groups targeting them. But the Taliban regime in Kabul have, of course, denied any role. They say they would never allow Afghanistan to be used as a launchpad for terror. But that has not stopped Pakistan from going to town with that accusation. And so we keep coming back to the same situation. Armed groups continue to target the Pakistan military, and Islamabad continues to blame the Taliban. In fact, on numerous occasions, Pakistani officials have threatened to conduct cross-border attacks on terror hideouts in Afghanistan. However, no such attack was ever confirmed until today. Try as they may to deny conducting airstrikes on another country, Pakistan seems to have followed in India's footsteps. It's ironic because this is the same Pakistan that condemned India in the past for doing the exact same thing. For years, India told Pakistan to stop providing safe haven to terrorists. But Pakistan did not listen. After the horrific Pulwama attack of 2019, when 40 Indian soldiers were killed by Pakistan-based Jaish-e-Mohammed, Pakistan still did not do anything. India took matters into its own hands. India bombed Jaish-e-Mohammed camp in Pakistan. It was a non-military preemptive action. It was not an act against Pakistan military. It was an exercise in self-defense to prevent a likely terror attack from the group in the future. Naturally, Pakistan also was not happy. Islamabad had condemned the attack. So it is ironic that today, faced with a somewhat similar situation, similar problem, Pakistan would do something that it apparently had a lot of problem with in the past. Only in Pakistan's case, the problem it faces is of its own making. One of the key reasons why Pakistan faces so many terror attacks now is because for years, Islamabad has used them as instruments of state policy. The Pakistan Army's protection of the Haqqani network and the Afghan Taliban as strategic assets is why the Taliban-affiliated groups retain the sanctuary and the attack capabilities. The question is, can Pakistan today really stand here and deny that? They cannot, and they are not doing that. Before the Pakistan government confirmed the strikes, in fact, the ISPR had said that the operation took place within the country where 8 terrorists, including a high-value target commander, Sarah alias Janan, were killed. This statement again was strange because the Pakistani government keeps telling the world that terror attacks, even the recent one that triggered today's strike, have been launched from Afghan soil. So which one is it really? More importantly, what kind of country's air force would carry out strikes within its own borders? Clearly, Pakistan did not think this through. It shows a confused state with confused policies. The only thing that is not confusing is the fact that Pakistan is being haunted by a homegrown monster. It is a reality that Islamabad has to live with. And a chilling reminder of that came today from the Taliban spokesperson, Zabiullah Mujahid. He said, and I'm quoting, Pakistan should not blame Afghanistan for the lack of control, incompetence and problems in its own territory. The race to power in India is heating up, and in the latest, a row has broken out over Congress leader Rahul Gandhi's remarks. Now, I know what you're thinking, again, because that's definitely not the first time you've heard about the leader landing in trouble because of something that he said. But this latest controversy is only getting bigger and has ignited a fierce war of words. With just a month to go for the general election in the country, what did Rahul Gandhi say this time around, and why has his statement sparked a row? What have the reactions been like? Let's break it all down for you. First things first, let's tell you what the Congress leader said. Rahul Gandhi was addressing a rally of the opposition alliance. This was after the conclusion of his Bharat Jodo Nyaya Yatra. Rahul Gandhi raised concerns about the operations of EVMs or electronic voting machines. He also claimed that the opposition is fighting against a Shakti, after saying that there is a word Shakti in Hinduism. Before I go on, listen into what Rahul Gandhi said.
हिंदू धर्म में शक्ति शब्द होता है. हम शक्ति से लड़ रहे हैं, एक शक्ति से लड़ रहे हैं. अब सवाल उठता है, वो शक्ति क्या है? जैसे किसी ने यहां कहा, राजा की आत्मा ईवीएम में है. सही है, सही है. राजा की आत्मा ईवीएम में है, हिंदुस्तान की हर संस्था में है, ईडी में है, सीबीआई में है, इनकम टैक्स डिपार्टमेंट में है.
What does the Congress leader mean is the question. Does he know what he means? You see, Shakti is a word in the Hindi language, which means power or might. But Shakti in Hinduism refers to deities. So did Rahul Gandhi mean that they are fighting against deities? And why would he say that? How can he not know the difference between the two terms? And naturally, his statement offends sentiments. The question also is, what did Rahul Gandhi really intend to achieve through that statement? Now, let me tell you what his statement did result in. Confusion, anger, and a full-fledged attack. The BJP has lashed out at the Congress leader, slamming his comments and calling him misogynistic. Prime Minister Modi himself has hit out, saying that if the Congress wants to destroy Shakti, he accepts the challenge and that he will leave no stone unturned to protect Shakti. His message is clear. Listen in.
जहां से इंडी अलायंस ने अपनी घोषणा पत्र जाहिर किया और उन्होंने कहा है कि उनकी लड़ाई शक्ति के खिलाफ है, मेरे लिए हर मां शक्ति का रूप है, हर बेटी शक्ति का रूप है और मैं भारत मां का पुजारी हूं. मैं आप शक्ति स्वरूपा सब माता बहन बेटियों का भी पुजारी हूं. और जिन्होंने कल शिवाजी पार्क में इंडी अलायंस ने अपना घोषणा पत्र शक्ति को खत्म करने के लिए किया है, मैं इस चुनौती को स्वीकार करता हूं और मैं इन शक्ति स्वरूपा माताओं बहनों की रक्षा के लिए जान की बाजी लगा दूंगा.
The Prime Minister went on to lash out at the Congress leader for even mentioning the destruction of Shakti. He spoke about how the fight is between those who want to destroy Shakti and those who worship Shakti.
क्या भारत की धरती पर कोई शक्ति के विनाश की बात कर सकता है क्या? अरे हमने तो चंद्रयान की सफलता को भी किसको समर्पित किया? चंद्रयान की सफलता को भी जहां चंद्रयान ने लैंड किया, हमने उस सफलता को भी शिव शक्ति नाम देकर के शिव शक्ति को समर्पित किया है। इसलिए लड़ाई एक तरफ शक्ति के विनाश के लोग करने वाले लोग हैं, दूसरी तरफ शक्ति की पूजा करने वाले लोग हैं। मुकाबला 4 जून को हो जाएगा।
BJP leader Nalin Kohli also said that through their allegations that question the integrity of the electronic voting machines, the Congress and Rahul Gandhi are insulting the electorate of India. He reiterated that the Prime Minister has one agenda, which is to make India a developed country by 2047. Meanwhile, the BJP spokesperson Shehzad Poonawalla hit out at Rahul Gandhi, saying that he was expressing misogynistic views, calling his statement an insult to the Hindu faith and attacking Rahul Gandhi for being against Nari Shakti. Nari Shakti basically means women power. The fact of the matter is, this is not the first time Rahul Gandhi's remarks have stirred a row. In fact, in the latest, he has issued a clarification, but the damage, it seems, is already done. A war of words has broken out. Who will win the electoral war is the question. And we will know the answer to that question come the 4th of June. India is upping the ante against China. According to media reports, it has started building a major ropeway project right next to the line of actual control in Arunachal Pradesh. Let me tell you more about this project. It is worth rupees 522 crores. That's almost $63 million. The ropeway will link the world-famous Tawang Monastery to the Pitsol Lake and will take about 3 years to develop. This is where it is on a map. Both the places are very close to China and Bhutan borders. This 400-year-old monastery is the largest in India and the second largest in Asia. It lies at an altitude of 10,000 feet. It's about 2 kilometers from Tawang town. The ropeway would go up from here to the lake, which is at an elevation of 12,000 feet, about 18 kilometers away from Tawang. Now, as of now, it takes about half an hour by road from Tawang to the lake, but going by the reports, the new ropeway will reduce the ride to only 5 minutes. The project is expected to propel tourism in the region and allow the visitors to explore the beauty of Arunachal Pradesh. And not just that, it also highlights India's growing strategic dominance in the state. The project comes on the heels of what happened last week. The Indian Prime Minister, remember, visited Arunachal Pradesh to inaugurate the Sela Tunnel. The tunnel passes through the Selachar-Bela Ridge in West Kameng district and is perched at an altitude of over 13,000 feet. It is now the world's longest bi-lane tunnel. It can handle the traffic of 3,000 cars and 2,000 trucks every day. Most importantly, it can facilitate year-round all-weather movement in this difficult-to-access part of India. Do you know what that really means? The tunnel will now allow Indian troops to move swiftly as well. It will allow faster deployment of weapons, soldiers and equipment to areas near the line of actual control. The ropeway and the tunnel are a part of an infrastructure boost in Arunachal Pradesh, and the government has big plans for the state. Several other projects are underway. Work has started for the Dibang multi-purpose hydropower project, which will be India's highest dam. And then there is the Trans-Arunachal Highway that runs across the entire state. Arunachal Frontier Highway, which will connect all the valleys in the state. The Indian Army is also working hard to provide last-mile connectivity to the most forward posts. You see, India is getting combat ready. And China, meanwhile, is fuming in anger. It does not like Indian activity in Arunachal Pradesh because it absurdly claims it as its own territory. You see, it's living in a parallel reality. In fact, it goes so far as to include the state in its map, claiming it as South Tibet. It has named villages and districts in Arunachal Pradesh as its own. After the Indian Prime Minister inaugurated the tunnel, it lashed out at India, saying that it strongly deplores the move. And India snapped back, saying that China's comments will not change the reality that the state of Arunachal was, is, and will always be an integral and inalienable part of India. The Dragon has responded once again, in fact. Listen in to what the Ministry of National Defense had to say.
The area of Zangnan is Chinese territory. China has never recognized the so-called Arunachal Pradesh, illegally set up by India, and firmly opposes it. We urge the Indian side to stop taking any actions that complicate the boundary issue and earnestly safeguard peace and stability in the border areas. The Chinese military will stay on alert at all times to resolutely safeguard China's national sovereignty and territorial integrity.
You see, China is warning that it is ready to fight. But seeing the current developments, so is India. And speaking of India's military prowess, Guyana also wants in on it. Its defense force has struck an agreement to acquire 2 new aircraft from India. Which planes are these? 2 Dornier 228. Let me tell you more about them first. Dornier 228 is a highly versatile multi-mission patrol aircraft. It is manufactured by Hindustan Aeronautics Limited for the Indian Coast Guard. It is lightweight and fuel efficient, with a wide range of operating speeds. Thanks to its quick role-changing capabilities, it can be used for maritime patrol and surveillance, marine pollution contingency, search and rescue, medical evacuation as well. Now, these planes are also ideal for short takeoff and landing. This makes them well suited for Guyana's terrain. The Guyana Defense Force would use them for maritime patrols, resupplying military bases, and troop movement to interior locations. Guyana has opted for a $23 million loan from Export-Import Bank of India for the purchase. Now, this is the first time India has signed a defense line of credit agreement with a Caribbean nation. But the aircraft are just the beginning. Guyana also wants to buy patrol vehicles, radars, and armored vehicles from India. And not just weapons, India has also offered defense training to Guyana. India provided 19 defense training slots to Guyana Defense Force. This was under its Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation Program. These training slots included 10 Army courses, 4 Naval courses, 5 Air Force courses. This not only highlights Guyana and India's good relations, but also India's growing defense might. India is modernizing its military and exporting state-of-the-art defense. Take the example of BrahMos. It is the first supersonic cruise missile known to be in service. It is the fastest cruise missile in the world. BrahMos has been developed by India's DRDO, that is the Defense Research and Development Organization, and Russia's NPO Martian Ostro-Enia. Just look at what the missile is capable of. BrahMos can be launched from land, sea, and air. It has a flight range of up to 290 kilometers. Its cruising altitude can go up to 15 kilometers, and it can carry a warhead weighing up to 300 kgs. It operates on a fire and forget principle, which basically means once fired, the missile can adopt to varieties of flight paths. India is not keeping this modern-day Brahmastra to itself. It has armed the Philippines with it. 2 years ago, India and the Philippines, remember, signed a $375 million deal for 3 batteries of the BrahMos. The delivery is now in progress and was slated to finish this month. India is in talks with at least 12 other countries, in fact, for the sale of the system. And that's only a part of the story. The Indian government has strategically transitioned from being a net importer to a net exporter. According to the Defence Ministry, India is now exporting to over 85 countries. Approximately 100 firms are actively exporting Indian defence products. This includes Dornier 228, 155mm advanced towed artillery guns, personal protective items, offshore patrol vessels, ALH helicopter, SU avionics, Bharti radio, coastal surveillance systems, Kavach MOD-2 launcher and FCS. You see, India has positioned itself as a growing defence superpower. The country's defence sector has propelled to new heights and it's only going to rise higher. The results of the Russian presidential election are out. Vladimir Putin has won by a landslide. This victory essentially secures him another 6-year term in office, meaning that he will serve as the Russian president until 2030. But none of this is surprising. What is surprising is just how casually Putin warned of a potential World War III during his victory speech. During his address to the press, Putin was asked whether a full-scale conflict between Russia and NATO is possible, and this is how he responded. Listen to it for yourself.
I think that anything is possible in the modern world, but I have already said this, and it is clear to everyone that this conflict between Russia and NATO will be just one step away from a full-scale World War III. I don't think anyone is interested in this.
Anything is possible. That is the Russian leader's statement. Putin categorically states, if the current hostilities between Russia and the NATO extend into an actual war, the world would be one step away from World War III. He quickly points out, no one wants such a scenario. Now, his remarks come after the French President Emmanuel Macron made his comments on the war. Macron appeared more hawkish on Russia recently. This week, he said France must ensure that Russia does not win the war. Last month, he said that the NATO could not rule out deployment of ground troops in Ukraine. Can you imagine what that would look like if the NATO puts boots on the ground to help Ukraine, to directly fight the Russian forces? Let me tell you, a full-blown catastrophe. And Putin is right. No one wants that. And this is why Allied leaders have distanced themselves from the French president's suggestion. Just to be clear, there is no consensus in the NATO about sending troops, at least at this stage. Ukraine has also not asked allies for soldiers. US President Joe Biden, in fact, has made it very clear. America will not send troops to fight in Ukraine. Finally, no Western government has scrambled to send troops, and that's because the NATO fears going to war with Russia. But the Russian president has no doubts. He says fighters from NATO states are currently present on the ground, helping Ukraine.
NATO military are present there in Ukraine. We know this. We hear French speech there and English speech. There's nothing good in this. Firstly for them, because they get killed in large numbers. But at the end of the day, it is not our choice. If someone wants to cover the internal problems of their countries with their aggressive external rhetoric, well, this is a well-known and widely used trick.
So is Putin right? Are NATO troops already on the ground in Ukraine? Well, it's a no from NATO. But truthfully, there is no way of knowing. What we do know is what the NATO leaders tell us publicly. And what they say is this: there will be no ground troops from NATO in Ukraine. In fact, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, the US President Joe Biden, the NATO Secretary General all have made this clear on multiple occasions. Still, we will not take Putin's statement lightly. He is serious. A direct conflict with the NATO could lead to a bigger, more catastrophic war. You see, for long, Putin has warned NATO against eastward expansion. In fact, Putin sent troops to Ukraine after multiple warnings to NATO. Do not attempt to expand your borders or it will be seen as a direct threat to Moscow. But the war in Ukraine follows decades of warnings from Moscow. The current West versus Russia conflict has many reasons, but in Russia, the greatest reason for the conflict is the betrayal of the West. At the end of the Cold War, in 1989 to 1990, NATO had promised Russia it will not expand to the east. But since 1999, NATO added 16 more members. So Russia feels betrayed, but NATO's eastward expansion particularly inflamed one person in Russia. No points for guessing who that person is. It is the current president of Russia, Vladimir Putin. So what does Putin's term mean for the Ukraine war? It confirms Putin's iron grip over Russia. It means Russia has survived Western sanctions. It comes at the back of Russian advances on the battlefield. It comes at a time when US-led West has become war-weary. Sure, no one wants World War III. And if they are really serious about that, then all steps should be taken to scale down the provocations and actually come to the talking table. But perhaps the most important step should be to really accept the honest truth. The truth about what started the war in the first place. Hunger, destitution, disaster, death. This is what Gaza looks like today. For 6 months, Israel has bombed this enclave, turning it into scorched earth. Yet, 6 months later, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is not done. Despite international pressure, Netanyahu says Israel will go ahead with its planned ground offensive in southern Gaza's Rafah. Right now, Rafah is the one remaining safe haven in Gaza. Over 1 million Palestinians have crammed into the city bordering Egypt in order to escape Israeli bombardment. Just because it is the last standing city does not mean it's safe. Displaced civilians are sleeping rough, in tents, without food, without water, without medicine. US President Joe Biden, who has supported Israel during the war, has said an Israeli invasion of Rafah would be a red line without credible civilian protection plans in place. But despite the pressure, Netanyahu says Israel will be pushing ahead with the Rafah offensive.
No international pressure will stop us from achieving all the goals of the war, eliminating Hamas, freeing all of our hostages, and ensuring that Gaza will no longer pose a threat to Israel. In order to do that, we will operate in Rafah too.
Did you hear that? Netanyahu says no amount of international pressure will stop us. There seems to be no remorse for the suffering right now. Sure, Netanyahu says Israel will not leave civilians trapped in Rafah, but so far no plan to protect the civilians has been presented. How does he plan to save the civilians then exactly? They have repeatedly paid the price of the war between Hamas and Israel. They are the ones getting caught in the crossfire. And this is why all of Israel allies have appealed to Netanyahu, do not enter Rafah, protect the civilians. In fact, the head of the UN's World Health Organization has appealed to Israel, in the name of humanity, do not launch the assault. That's what he said. But Netanyahu is adamant his office has approved the military's plan for an operation in Rafah, though no timeline has been given. If Israel goes ahead with the plan, where will the civilians go? Considering it is the last safe place for the civilians, what is Israel's grand evacuation plan for them? More importantly, what is Israel's plan for the next stage of the war? Where are things headed? Netanyahu has said it would be impossible to achieve the goal of destroying Hamas if Israel were to leave what he says are the group's last battalions in Rafah. According to Israeli estimates, 5,000 to 8,000 Hamas fighters are holed up there. But the real reason for Netanyahu's Rafah insistence is this. He is treading a fine line as he tries to appease his far-right coalition at home and cooperate with the US, a key ally. Already, as I mentioned earlier, the US has warned Israel not to proceed with the Rafah plan without a plan to shield the civilians. Washington has also described Israel's response to the October 7 attacks as over the top. And so Netanyahu faces mounting pressure over the high death toll in Gaza. But all that pressure and all that criticism is not deterring Israel's plans. It has shown no signs of winding down the offensive, which brings me back to the question, where else can Gazans go from here? The United Kingdom is in the middle of a shoplifting epidemic. Yes, a shoplifting epidemic. According to the British Retail Consortium, shoplifting incidents have doubled from 8 million cases to a whopping 16 million cases in a year. This is the highest it has been for more than 2 decades. There are approximately 600 thefts in an hour, and shops and stores have reported a total loss of £1.8 billion. A lot of the thefts have been traced to organized criminal gangs that are targeting stores for clothes, health, beauty products, food items, and anything they feel there is a market for. It's no secret that the UK has been facing a recession and an economic crisis ever since its withdrawal from the European Union, a move more popularly known as Brexit. On one hand, unemployment has become a huge problem, and on the other, businesses are struggling with increased costs, labor, and supply shortages. But experts say that a lot of the money being made by shoplifting is further going into fueling the drug market. And to tackle this, almost 90 retail leaders like Boots, Tesco, and Sainsbury have approached the UK government for a solution, as many of these incidents are violent and their staff safety is becoming a huge concern. Shoplifters are often armed and carried out robberies at gunpoint. Many retailers even claim that the police is overburdened and is not being able to do much. Shop owners and retailers are pushing for a stringent law against assaulting a staff worker, which would carry tougher sentences and require the police to record all incidents of retail crime and allow the allocation of more resources to tackle this problem. But some retail store chains like Boots have already started taking matters into their own hands. They have set up multiple CCTV cameras, elaborate software, and even made a list of offenders. In fact, the staff also started wearing body cameras and can get access to support, possibly before a situation is about to turn violent. Experts do point out that technology such as self-checkouts and the display of expensive goods on shelves has also added to the problem. But regardless, it all circles back to the central problem of poor economic state of affairs. And as I wrap up tonight's edition of Gravitas, I have sad news for the women watching our show tonight. Do you feel you are being paid far less than your male peers? That all the good opportunities at work go to your male colleagues? Now, as it turns out, you are not alone. And you probably knew that already. But you see, things are worse than you thought. This is a global problem to the extent that no country, not even a single one, is an exception. A new report from the World Bank has made this shocking revelation. It has found that none of the countries in the world afford women the same opportunities as men in the workforce. None of them. Yes, we know that gender pay gap exists and that offices are plagued with sexism. But what's shocking is the extent of the entire problem. Over 190 countries in the world, none of them is close to gender equality at work, not even the so-called developed and progressive ones. What a shame. The global gender gap is far wider than you think. The World Bank basically investigated the labor market in 190 countries, and for the first time, it took the impact of childcare and safety policies on women's participation into account. And on doing that, it found women, on an average, enjoy just 64% of the legal protections that men do. Globally, for every dollar a man makes, women earn just 77 cents. In 81 countries, a woman's pension benefits do not account for work absences related to childcare. 151 countries have laws against sexual harassment in the workplace, but only 40 of them cover abuse in public areas or on public transport, which means women are mostly unprotected on their way to work. And you know what? The system is not only affecting women, it's affecting the economy as a whole. The World Bank says that closing the gender gap could raise global gross GDP by more than 20%. I'm telling you this because solely making a case for women, it seems, will not cut it. Simply put, employers, companies, the entire corporate world just could not care enough. But now that the entire global economy is suffering, will someone make a change? There are plenty of laws into place. The question comes down to their implementation. That is a wrap on this edition of Gravitas tonight. This is me, Molly Gambhir, signing off. Thanks very much for watching. Good night.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one.